I would like to take this opportunity to introduce you to today's guest of honor, Mr. Sudhir Mehta, Chairman and Managing Director of Pinnacle Industries Private Limited. Pinnacle is India's leading automotive seating and interiors company. Mr. Sudhir Mehta is a serial entrepreneur who has started and successfully led several ventures. The group currently employs over 3,000 people in India, Israel, Spain, and US. He is also the past chairman of CIA Western Region. He was confirmed the Super Entrepreneur of the Year award in 2018 for his contribution to the Indian manufacturing sector. Mr. Mehta is also president of MCCIA. He is the director at Force Motors Limited, Pune, a leading automobile company. He is the director at Revulis Irrigation from Israel, one of the leading drip and micro irrigation manufacturers worldwide. He is the director at Insta by Kidder India Private Limited, Pune. It's India's largest manufacturer of retail store fittings. He is also the director at VDL Pinnacle Engineering, Pune, a joint venture company with VDL Group of Netherlands to provide specialized engineering services. He is the founder at AIC Pinnacle Ventures, one of the select few industry backed Atal incubation centers. Mr. Mehta is on the board of management of Ajinkya DY Patil University and member of governing body of Symbiosis College of Arts and Commerce. He is also the member of India Angels Network. He is involved in various social activities in his capacity as lead and coordinator at Pune Platform for COVID-19 Response, a volunteer group of prominent business, industry, and startup leaders to support the availability of critical care items for hospitals as well as support government in its effort to contain the pandemic. He is a secretary at BMVSS Indore, India's largest LIMS NGO in the world, which has rehabilitated more than 1.3 million amputees. He is a partner Global Research in Innovation and Technology NGO, making the Leverage Freedom Chair a joint activity between MIT and Pinnacle. The initiative enables people with disabilities in the developing countries to get access to mobility. He is the director at Lighthouse Communities Foundation and director Science and Technology Park, University of Pune. Thank you, sir. Thank you for joining us today and giving us this opportunity. It is a true honor. We also have some special guests joining us today to help us unravel the very interesting journey of Mr. Mehta. We have Pradeep Bharga, Independent Director, Persistent Systems. He has a long experience in both state and private enterprises in fields ranging from consumer, industrial, and energy sector. He has worked with Atomic Energy Commission, BHEL, Bharat Forge Group, and General Electric before joining Cummins in 2000. He steered the power generation business of Cummins in India. We also have Prashant Girbane, Director General MCCIA and Honorary Director Pune International Center. He has worked with TCS in multiple geographies in the US, Europe, and Asia, with London office as base. Worked with United Nations Organization as national consultant and also as an advisor to the Secretary General of Commonwealth. Welcome to the panel. And the host for the session today is Mr. Vineet Patni. Vineet is a seasoned, experienced insurance, banking, healthcare, and digital business professional. He has held CXO level board positions and member of managing committee and worked with board and shareholders of leading and complex joint ventures. Welcome, Vineet. I would now request Vineet to take the session ahead. Thank
Thanks,
you.
Namita. Firstly, thank you so much, Sudhir, Prashant, Pradeep ji, for joining today. I think it's an honor and pleasure, and a big thank you on behalf of Thai Pune ecosystem and Thai global ecosystem for doing so much, not only for Pune but for Maharashtra and India, and we'll talk a lot about it as we discuss during the course of the session. So today's session will be covered in five different sections, I would say, or themes. And first, of course, is we'll talk about Sudhir himself, what makes Sudhir. Second, we will talk about Pune in the grip of first wave, COVID first wave. We'll move to Pune platform for COVID response. Mission Vayu, very, very interesting and a great conversation. And finally, of course, preparing for the third wave and what's the learning for startups and opportunities for entrepreneurs. I also take this opportunity to thank people who've joined in today, everyone who's attending today, and apologize for a date change from Wednesday to Friday due to certain circumstances which were outside our control. The session also will be available in a recorded format later, and we'll certainly circulate to all of you, in the due course of a couple of days. So with that, I'll quickly move to the first part of our conversation. And Sudhir, you can unmute yourself, and Namrata, if you can, just pin us who are there in the conversation, or whoever is handling the Zoom today. So Sudhir, first, I think the very important part of our conversation that we had and we spent a good time speaking about was the word Samvad. I think you always spoke a lot about it, and you, of course, tried to explain me what it means. And you said there is nothing, equivalent of Samvad in English. And you also talked about artificial boundaries that people end up creating. And I think it's a good beginning to know a little more about Sudhir yourself. So can you tell us a little more about what Samvad means, and what does it mean for you? And you've always spoken a lot about it.
So first of all, Vinit, thanks so much for this opportunity. It's wonderful to see many friends. One of the advantages of this virtual session is I can see many of my old friends here. Some of them I have not met for quite some time. So thank you for connecting and making this possible. I think even more importantly, I'm holding most people in Pune away from their last restaurant outing for a while, because from tomorrow we'll be at lockdown 3, which means that restaurants will shut down at 7. So I won't blame anybody if they move from this session to have a drink, and hopefully we will get back to some sort of normalcy soon. But having said that, let me answer the question that you were asking. I spent quite a bit of time in Indore and Delhi, so those are much more of the Hindi-speaking kind of places. And one of the words which I actually never always thought was important, but never realized the meaning till about 2 years ago, is the word Samvad. And I think this, to my mind, is what exemplifies what Pune has been able to do through the Pune platform for COVID, and we'll speak a lot more about it. But typically, we do a lot of business in Israel, and I started going to that country about 8 to 9 years ago, and have been a regular visitor since then. And one of the things I'm always fascinated with there is when you meet a particular individual there, their cards seem to change every 2 years. So when you meet somebody the first time, they are maybe a diplomat, you meet them again in 2 years. They are a business person, you meet them again in 2 years. They're working at a university, excuse me. And then again, 2 years later, they'll be an entrepreneur again. So they seem to have kind of perfected this art of seamless movement across sectors. On the other hand, when we look at what we do in India, typically we are all kind of straitjacketed into different segments. You are either an entrepreneur, you are either a social worker, you are either a government, you are either a bureaucrat, or maybe at the most 2 of the above. And most of the time we end up kind of working not with each other, but talking to each other most of the time. And I think this is where Samvad comes in, when you realize that all of us are much more similar than we are different. And if we start to work together, a lot can happen. And this is why this is my favorite word, whether it is in the company, whether it is in terms of social projects, or whether it is working across NGOs, working on public policy, that if we are able to do that, we make amazing things happen.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. So I think, we'll speak a lot about it as the session progresses. But, the first part, of course, is knowing a little more about you. And I think the conversation with you was fantastic. You spent time in Indore, you had association in Delhi, you moved to Chicago, you moved to Israel, you had association in Jaipur, you moved to Pune. So you've traveled across, right? You were in in food business, then you move to automobile, you've been in agriculture, you've bought companies, scaled them up. So you've done many things. I think it's rare to find someone who's done so much in his life. So just to understand a little more, right? You tend to get bored very quickly. Is that true, or you tend to move to new things that get excited, that you find very exciting? What is it that makes Sudhir, just to understand a little more about you?
No, you're right. This is probably one of the congenial faults that I have is this, let's say, getting bored of what I do easily. But the only solution that I've been able to find is to find new and exciting things to do, some of which may be quite madcap at times, but I enjoy doing them. And fortunately, I have been able to do quite a bit of different things. But what gives me really the high or a kick is actually to be able to go into a new situation, to be able to learn something which one may not know much about. And the good thing is when you come out of that, you learn things that you can apply in different situations. So the context may be completely different, whether if you're working in a manufacturing business versus an engineering business or in marketing. But I think the fundamentals of what makes a business tick are pretty much the same. They are the people who make it happen. They are the systems, the processes, any of the other things. And I think there is a lot more in common to those that one can think of. So to that extent, I've enjoyed doing these different things. And even on the social side, in whether it is in terms of NGOs or social projects, I think that for me, that's always creates excitement.
So, you seem to be a very quick learner, because, there are people who take years and years before they settle down doing something. Is there a message you want to leave with for entrepreneurs or for people attending the session, that when you switch gears or you shift gears or you shift roles, how do you, what is it that drives a person to get into something new and then get moving very, very quickly? Is there something that you want to leave with, or some sort of learning that they could adapt in their lives?
There's very, very smart people that are on this group today. So I don't want to give any such prescriptions. All I can say is I've been very lucky to be with people who are a lot smarter than I am. And when you spend time with people who are smarter than you, then I think it improves your IQ over a period of time. So one of the clear learnings for me is learn from people who are the experts in their fields. When you talk to them, when you engage with them, when you read, reading is something I enjoy a lot. You end up learning a lot. And I think typically when you spend time with people from different groups, again, there are learnings that one can take across, whether it is different people will have different skills, they'll have different perspectives. And learning from them, I found that to be the most important thing. And I think the other thing that one should be shameless about is taking good ideas from other people and seeing how you can implement that in your own businesses or in your any projects that you do. I think it's always good to learn from others. So for me, I become better by learning from others.
So great, you've got a great, drive in terms of learning, having experts come in. I think that's fantastic. But, what were your earlier years as an entrepreneur? You also spoke about, you had a company where there was a major investment and you let go of it, or you basically exited. So you do look, and that's what the portfolio of businesses look like. Pinnacle is into so many different businesses. And I also read about the VAT piece that clearly looked in as an opportunity, and you walked in. I think also for everyone, Mr. Pradeep is here, Prashant is here. Just it's a conversation between groups. So do not hesitate to ask Sudhir any tough questions at any point of time. So go ahead, Sudhir. Any earlier years as an entrepreneur, or earlier years what you've seen, or something that helped you build what you are, just as a learning for everyone?
So again, for me, my education was actually in computer science and economics. I did my undergrad, and then I was working as in investment banking and finance in the US, and then did my MBA from University of Chicago. But after a few years, again, I was clear I wanted to come back to India, and it was kind of a circuitous way to come back. At what I was telling you earlier, at that point, I was figuring out whether to start a granola bar company in India. This was to make granola bars. Knew nothing about it. Spent time to figure out. At that point in time, there was no granola bars being made here, and almost set up a factory to do that. Kind of packed our bags, and my wife was also there with me in Chicago. We were to leave from Chicago, and that's when, as an entrepreneur, sometimes you learn how things don't work out the way you do. And I got a call from the gentleman that we were supposed to work with, that he had been offered $500 million at that time by Nabisco. So that was the good news for him, was he got a $500 million. The bad news for me was the project was off because he didn't want to work anymore. And so I came back to India, was keen to get into manufacturing, settled in Indore, spent many interesting and good years there, have many friends in Indore, set up a manufacturing plant for auto components. After that, was involved in setting up a truck company, which was a joint venture with MAN, and ran that company for about 8 to 10 years before the company was sold back to MAN. At that point in time, it was first this I did for about 10 years. And since then have been in various fields. As I said, about 6-7 years ago, went to Israel for the first time. We realized and really fell in love with that country. Many wonderful things about a country which is the size of Pune, but there is absolutely so much innovation, so much entrepreneurship happening there. And uh, we have a drip irrigation company there, which is headquartered in Gujarat in India, and also then in Israel, and have had the good fortune of growing that company, and also seeing how the transition in the agri space is happening in India, which has been crying out for a lot of innovation. Uh, at the same time, we looked at some opportunities in manufacturing. So again, the core of what we do is manufacturing, but it's really to see how we can innovate for India, and to be able to bring products which can bring some new innovation in terms of what is required here.
And I think that's a great learning. One is, ability to adapt and move to new lines of business, scale them up, grow them, and of course, exit at the right time. So you've done a lot, as far as the various ventures are concerned. I think, and you've created some fantastic value. Just to get to a little bit about the agri piece, right? You spoke a lot about the, being a non-resident Israeli, as good as that, right? Living in India at one point of time, because you do visit there, right? Something about, what is it that you're doing in the agriculture space, and, a lot of innovation that's happening. You talked about drip irrigation, but do you want to throw a little more light? And is there opportunity for entrepreneurs who are in the group to pick up something?
Absolutely. I think agriculture is an area which is needs a lot of innovation. I don't think the backdrop of this I need to explain to anybody in India. And for water is actually going to be one of our great challenges. As you can see, even if you look at in terms of what the government did last time, if there was one thing that won probably the election for the government last time, it was the Ujjwala gas scheme. Similarly, I think if you see what the government is doing this time, it is the tap water for all. And that's one of the flagship missions of the government. So water is something which is going to be an absolute challenge for our country and the world, and we are running out of it. It's that simple. And drip irrigation actually is one of those things where the business case is absolutely compelling. A farmer can save as much, and your return on investment comes in less than 2 years, but we still remain less than 10% of our land is under drip irrigation. So it's a long way to go, and there's many reasons for why this has not happened. The fact is, it improves productivity by a factor of 2 to 3. So there is a huge immediate return on investment. And equally importantly is now what's happening with precision agriculture. So we started a company in Israel, and then we did a lot of the engineering work for that in India, which was a company called Mana Irrigation, where we are doing actually mapping of the fields. Now, typically that mapping can be done in two ways. One is you put sensors in the field, and then you map what's happening, which is the usage of water, which is fertigation, which is at what time should we do the seeds, if there's a problem with the field. And the second way to do it is what we've done is through satellites, where on a smartphone you can have it. And that was something that we started to do for large farms in places like US and Australia, But then we realized for the Indian market, it was completely different. You have a farmer which has 1 acre, 2 acre. Many of them are subsistence farmers. They don't have the ability to pay. Normally, a lot of it comes as subsidy from the government. So how do you add value to the farmer? How do you charge for it? How do you see that something which is absolutely, I mean, the business case, typically as an entrepreneur, you look at business cases, and here the business case is crystal clear, but at the same time, the adaptation is very, very difficult, because how do you convince a farmer to be able to use it, to see value, and maybe from 20 to 30,000 rupees an acre, if they're making, they can go to 1 lakh rupees an acre. That's the kind of incremental improvement or huge quantum improvement that you can have in manufacturing. Typically in the automotive industry, if you can save 0.1%, you've done a great job, because everything is so optimized. And on the other side, you've got industries where there is opportunity to grow output by 200 to 300%. But the adaptation is the problem, convincing is the problem. All of these are the challenges. So I think those are the lessons that one can do. And for any entrepreneur, I think the agri space is a huge opportunity, but at the same time is a huge challenge, because the way the system is configured today, there is an end customer which is paying a good price, but then you have the farmer which doesn't get the sufficient for their produce. Unfortunately, our farm laws, which in my opinion should have gone through last year, didn't happen. So you've still got this huge system where something which is the first person who's producing it is paying 1x and or getting 1x, and the person who's buying it is probably paying 3x. But this is something hopefully we can improve as a country, because I think our GDP growth depends on it. So I think the agri sector has many, many long-term opportunities for growth, and it's a very stable sector also.
Fantastic, fantastic. I think we'll speak a lot about you as we progress, but we'll now, I'll ask, we will move to the whole, we'll go back in time a little bit about what happened in Pune during wave 1, and we'll bring everyone in. But before that, can I ask Namrata to just share a small video that was shared by Sudhirji and everyone, so for everyone to see what Pune did as far as COVID is concerned. So Namrata, can you please play the video?
सुनसान रस्त्यावरून सारे पुन्हा एकदा साथ आले, बघता बघता माणुसकीला आपुलकीचे हात आले, मायेचा एक हात आला, ज्याने दिला घास पुन्हा, जगण्याच्या चवीत आला, श्वासाना सुवास पुन्हा, कष्टाचा एक हात आला, उभा ठाकला दिन रात, लाटे मधल्या खाटेवरून खेचून आणले जगण्यात, मैत्रीचा हात आला, घेऊन नवे तंत्रज्ञान, प्राण आणून डोळ्यात, वाचविले कित्येक प्राण, धीराचा हात आला, शेजारी बाजारी, मदतीची ही अखंड ज्योत, फिरली नाही माघारी, प्रार्थनेचा हात आला, हेच रे सांगाया, पलीकडे सारे स्वतःच्या लागले मागाया.
मदतीला धावणारा, माणुसकी जपणारा प्रत्येक पुणेकर म्हणजे अभिमान पुण्याचा.
I think that was a fantastic video, though it is in Marathi, but I think we all could understand the meaning and what's there behind it. And I think there are so many people who work tirelessly day in and day out over the last 18 months to on various areas, and I think that's what we would discuss. But before I just have a few questions to our guests, Sudhir, just how many people are involved in PPCR Pune platform for COVID response, just from a numbers perspective?
Yeah, so Vinit, what started as a small initiative, which a couple of us started way back in March, and then this was anchored at the MCCIA. Now we've got almost more than 1,000 companies which have supported us, 1,000 companies and individuals who have supported us, and I would say out of them at least 200 are working with us almost on a continuous basis. We have over 250 of the government and private hospitals of the city who are again deeply engaged with us at various levels. We have groups through which we work almost on a daily basis, and we've done various initiatives with them. We have almost 50 NGOs again who are working closely with us. So right from the Rotary clubs to the Lions clubs to Jan Kalyan Samiti to the Dalit Chamber of Commerce, the Robin Hood Army, many NGOs of the city are closely involved with us. We are also fortunate that almost 10 of the local government offices, right from the commissioner to the collector to all of the other senior government officials in the city, are working in seamless coordination with us. And I think these are kind of, all of these are the pillars of what Pune has been able to do as a model. And in addition to that, we have many civic citizens. I mean, you'll be interested, since this is partially a tech crowd, we also have many of the influencers of Pune. So for instance, social media has been one of the big drivers, as you know, for any awareness campaigns. And we are very fortunate that many of them are part of this campaign. So and now we have donors all around the world who supported us.
Wonderful. So we'll talk a lot about it. But Pradeep, when we were talking, I think one thing you talked about is Pune ki mitti, right? In our conversation, in the way you explained, is Pune ki mitti mein kuch hai, hawa mein kuch hai. And I remember that conversation, and maybe it'll be good to just take us back in time. March 2020, I think you were heading MCCIA. Prashant was there, Sudhir, all of you were there, and you were running your normal day-to-day work. So what is it that both about Pune ki mitti as well as what happened in March 2020, or what is it that you all were thinking when we had the first wave hitting us?
Yeah, so about the soil of Pune first, Pune ki mitti. First of all, Pune is privileged to have very tall leaders across the spectrum, whether it's manufacturing, services, academia, research establishment, education, culture. I mean, as I keep saying, it's very difficult to define Pune. Pune defies definition. Pune ki paribhasha bahut mushkil hai banana. So that's what Pune is all about. Now, not only are these tall individuals, but these are all individuals who are ready to extend their hand and ready to sort of come together without, to use very colloquial, city bajate hain to sab aa jate hain. Actually city nahi bajate hain, but the point is they're so well connected that people would do without any egos, work for a common cause. And there are multiple instances where Pune has demonstrated this, where there are no, let's say there are no egos, there are no things. And if it's in the interest of the city, so that's what Pune ki mitti. I've had personal experience in the Pune Power model, which I'll come to later, but right now let's stay on the focus. So here, when, yes, you're right, in March, when the first lockdown happened, all of us were numb. Ki ho kya raha hai? And, and there was this statement about Prime Minister who says, life and livelihood mein pehle jaan hai to jahan hai. So he talked about life first. That was the time when Prashant, I and Sudhir has been my colleague in Maratha Chamber. He's of course a president now, but we were together on the board of Maratha Chamber. When Sudhir said कि कुछ और करना चाहिए, we should do something more. So here's something where, as a Chamber of Commerce and Industry and Agriculture, we were into a crossroad of saying, what is our charter? What is our scope? To use colloquial, हम कौन से track पे जाते हैं? So we were all about livelihood, whether it's our membership, whether it's about entrepreneurship, whether it's about dealing with the government advocacy, it's all about livelihood of different nature. MSMEs हैं कि बड़े हैं, सबकी livelihood के ऊपर चर्चा होती थी. So we suddenly started getting onto the track called life. Because here's a Chamber of Commerce which is picking up sanitizers and food camps and later on BiPAPs and ventilators. And here's a Chamber of Commerce who's talking about hygiene and COVID appropriate behavior and distributing these things. So to use again thing, ये बिल्कुल traffic violation था हमारा. We were not supposed to get into this trap, but luckily police commissioner was also part of the whole thing. तो traffic violation नहीं किया उसने. But we really got into an agenda which was not a part of a charter articles. प्रशांत तो हमारा बहुत पक्का सेनानी है ना, तो articles memorandum understanding में sanitizer distribute करना chamber का काम नहीं था. But then COVID हिंदुस्तान में दुनिया में आने का भी किसी के charter में नहीं था. So when some आपदा आती है, when you come across a very situation, we all have to redefine ourselves. So answer to your question was, that's the time when a choice was between life and livelihood. And I'm not using a standard colloquial, but we as chamber also said कि ये करना है क्या? So that's where Sudhir, Prashant and I went into multiple conversation, and where we saw this powerful steam engine, electric engine, जो भी बोलो सुधीर को, वो दौड़ने का था. तो हमने कहा ट्रैक तो देना चाहिए, क्योंकि what he was talking about made eminent sense in terms of being able to make a difference. And here is something where I think, Vineet, it's important for us to understand. Why did 3 of us or 6 of us or 10 of us got into it? Because we acknowledged, and I think it's a very, very strong point, that Maratha Chamber had a credibility earned over the last 8 decades plus. We have some of the most eminent, outstanding Pune Maharathis boliye, who have been our past presidents. We have membership which is of 3,000 members. So here's a Sanstha whose name had strong, people could resonate. Of course, they couldn't resonate with sanitizers with Maratha Chamber, but the point is they could resonate with the credibility of this institution. So that's where we said, if any institution can step in at this point of time, and we realized we had to leverage our strength. What is our leverage? We can leverage, negotiate, buy equipment from wherever it's required. We can buy materials wherever it's required. We understand supply chain. We understand, and nobody will question our motives, because हम ना तो healthcare business में हैं, nor are we doctors, nor are we any of those people. So we're coming with the right cause. So that's where we need this whole thing with Sudhir being the prime mover and Prashant and I being the enabler. And of course, Prashant and his team did a huge support, because it required things. The BPSI concept required actually buying. In the first year itself, we mobilized money first. We bought large amount of equipment, material, 12, 13, 15 crore ka jo bhi kiya tha first year mein. So that all came through because of the felt need. And there was no precedent for any one of us. Should a Chamber of Commerce do it? Or should an NGO do it? Should government do it? I mean, we said we'll get everybody involved and we'll all do it. So that was a background.
But I think one point before we dwell and get into more details, right? If you look at the wave one, right, Pune was hit the hardest. In fact, there hasn't been a single moment where people said, hey, do anything but do what Pune is doing, right? Pune wave one was not a model to look at, not a model to copy, and anything and everything that we see, whether it's an explosion of cases where other cities could curtail the number of cases, whether it is, the explosion of mortality, morbidity, anything and everything, things were just not going right. So maybe, it'll be good for yourself, Sudhir and Prashant, to also talk about what were the learnings from the wave one, or before the PPCR got formed. But I think, there was a parallel front very clearly that got created to fight the the battle. And I think it's important that everyone recognizes the power of a parallel front, which later on was joined and supported by almost anyone and everyone. But I think the key part is, what were the learnings or few things that come out? Maybe Prashant, you want to come in. What makes the whole setup succeed, and then others can. You spoke about the three things that came together. Maybe you want to speak about it. I'll ask Sudhir, Pradeep ji to jump in at any point of time.
Sure. Thanks, Vineet. I think given the format of TIE, I'll keep it to the first names, all of you, with all the due respect. So thanks, Vineet. I think the memories go back to possibly just the day when the lockdown was announced. I was sitting exactly where I'm sitting, and I remember I talked with Pradeep, and he said that the first thing we had to think about was our office. The second thing was about industries, because the 3,000 companies that are member of the chamber, we have to send some communication to all of them and receive all their concerns and to respond to those, right? That's what we were busy with. And then we said, we'll think about what next. And I had a call from Sudhir. Sudhir was then vice president, and aur kuch karte hain. And I have talked with the president, then Pradeep. So I said, all right, but pehle office ko to bolte hain kya karna hai apna. And to cut the long story short, so we decided that there should be leverage on the chamber, its legacy, its brand, its people, and everything about it. But also we should be a lot more inclusive. And hence, to ensure that anybody and everybody is able to join it, we should call it a platform. Then Sudhir said, that's what we would do it. So what's the name? And we said, it's a Pune platform. We didn't have much time. And anyone who has interacted with Sudhir would know one thing for sure, the word speed, right? Speed of execution. Said, हाँ ठीक है, नाम रखते हैं, आगे बढ़ते हैं, आगे क्या करते हैं और, right? So we created the name Pune Platform for COVID Response, because that sounded very logical. If it's a Pune's platform and responding to COVID, right? And there came the name PPCR. I think there are three things, as I mentioned to you, Vineet, in our earlier discussion, that matter. There is an individual, first of all, who need to drive it all. As Pradeep mentioned earlier, that engine, that individual with energy, with enthusiasm, with execution, with speed, was and is Sudhir. Right. Second, you also need an institution that has a brand, that has a legacy, that has a structure, that has people who are willing to work day in and day out to make it happen. I think given those two, the individual and institution, you also need a governance structure so that it's sustainable. Pradeep provided much of that. We continued to do this even after Pradeep stepped down from presidency. Sudhir requested him that we need to continue with the same governance structure. So almost on all days, three of us meet at 3 in the afternoon. And there was no coincidence about the number. It just so happened that for some reason we started talking at 3 in the afternoon. But most days, most of the conversations are very quick. Some conversations are very long. Because there are more than one individual, the perspectives are different. We haven't necessarily agreed on everything at all the time. But nothing has stopped us from moving forward, because the intentions and objectives and purpose is absolutely clear. So given Sudhir's experience of having done the Pune model, given Sudhir's experiences earlier, this did not look too big a challenge in doing this. And वो जो कहते हैं ना कि एक बार when the leader, the institution, the governance structure comes together, तब कारवा बनता है. All the well-meaning people of Pune came together. Look at the coincidences, right? MCCI की स्थापना जहां हुई, जो पहला ऑफिस था MCCI का, वो था गायकवाड़ वाड़ा. Many Punekars should know Gayakwad Wada is where Lokmanya used to stay. There was an office for Kesari Maratha. That's where Maratha Chamber of Commerce, Industries and Agriculture started. The moment you see Lokmanya Tilak, other than his clarion call, the other thing everyone remembers is the Ganesh Utsav, the ability to bring people together, right, for a larger purpose. What a coincidence that once again, in a nanoparticle format, because Lokmanya was too great and too big and continues to be, in a nanoparticle of that, we could recreate in creating this platform. So very, very proud of that. But all of this, thanks to the individual, the institution, and then putting the governance structure. I think that's something that's a takeaway for any institution to take it forward. I think that's where I'll stop.
Thank you so much, Prashant. Very well articulated. So, Sudhir, I think, and Prashant and Pradeep ji, I think both of you, the healthcare infrastructure in Pune on wave one was really extremely poor, and we've seen that, right? So, and the numbers, maybe 50 positive cases, 100 positive cases, and we were all panicking. 100 case ho gaye hain, 200 case ho gaye, and suddenly, in wave 2, we've seen 12,000, 15,000, I don't know, much greater numbers, right? Parallel, similar to that, I think even the number of hospital beds, anything that we talked about was much lower. So we want to just throw for the audience a little bit of flavor of where we were from the scale of healthcare infrastructure to what got created in 1.5 years. I've been tracking healthcare for a fairly long time, and I think what happened in Pune in last 12 months, countries haven't done in last 50 years, right, or 30 years. So clearly, some numbers would be really good to hear before we jump into the most, powerful part of the session, which is Mission Vayu. So just from a PPCR perspective, and I think for everyone just to know, PPCR is a completely virtual platform. It's not a body, if I'm correct. It's not an institution. It's not an organization so far, unless it's got created. But yeah, it's backed, and it just brings people together in a informal, formal way, but delivers results which are way more powerful than a formal process. So, I kept hearing one thing, that when the normal processes fail, and when you have a pandemic of this kind, I think the informal structures end up delivering much powerful results than a formal structure. So maybe it'd be good to hear both of you and speak a little more. So do you want to start, and then I'll ask for you to join?
Sure. So, Vinit, you're right. I think, first of all, none of us knew even what COVID was. And I think one of our colleagues in PPCR, Sahil, explains it very well. And the way he's put it is, this is one of those challenges where there was no information asymmetry, because typically on an issue, you have some people who are the experts and some people who know much more than others. In this case, everybody was starting from a zero platform. And when you think about it, that's really exactly what happened. Typically, for most issues, you will have people who already know a lot about a particular subject. Going back to March of last year, just spend a minute on what the Pune healthcare system is. And frankly, except maybe going to a hospital to get a checkup every few years, I knew nothing about the healthcare system, because it was not something which was at all, and I didn't even know. Maybe I knew 4 doctors in Pune when we started, and that was mostly outside the hospital over drinks rather than meeting them at the hospital. We had, at that point in time, 400 beds, which were kind of put together by the administration to deal with COVID. And to their defense, they also didn't know what was happening, what was going to be the number of cases, what etc. was happening. Pune, unlike most of the capital cities, also doesn't have a large government infrastructure. Our only large government hospital is the Sassoon Hospital, which actually, even to this date, is one of the, I would say, the work in progress for the city after 50, 60 years. For a hospital which is supposed to have a capacity of 1,500, we've never had more than 500 people who've been accommodated in Sassoon, and that's at the peak. When we started, it was much less. So you had a city which was pretty much dependent on the private healthcare system of in the private hospitals. Now, these private hospitals comprised of 2 or 3. There's the large private hospitals. There is the Dinanath, the Rubies, the Sayadris, which all of us know, which are really the large hospitals. But then there was a huge chunk of these mid-sized, and then the second is what one would typically call the nursing homes, the 10, 20 kind of hospitals. Now, when the administration did the mapping, and very closely we were working with them right from the inception, we realized that the only way was really to get the private sector hospitals involved in this fight. And I think if there is one success of the Pune story, much more in the second wave than in the first, it's really the amazing job that the private hospitals have done. I think we are all the armchair people. We are not the true heroes of this story. The true heroes of this story are really the people who put their lives on the line. And this was, remember, when they were not vaccinated. This was wave one, when the healthcare workers were themselves falling sick. I'm sure all their families were telling them, what the hell are you doing? Why are you going and doing this? In one of these, and this is a valuable management lesson, one of the things we understood is much better than government pressure, and the government at times has to put pressure, and they mandated that people had to turn to COVID. I think it is really the spirit of volunteership, and it's the spirit of Pune coming together, which convinced all these hospitals to turn COVID. Now, remember, this was not, this was a time, now we know a lot more about it. We are less scared about it, but this was the time where there was no vaccine. People didn't know what would happen if you got treated. Many healthcare workers were falling sick. So we really turned to the doctors to convince other doctors. So, I mean, we have, of course, the two big heroes of Pune hospitals like Dr. Kelkar, Dinanath Mangeshkar Hospital. They've treated 25,000 patients so far. It's one of the huge success stories of how COVID can be treated by private hospitals in an ethical, excellent manner. But then there were all these rural hospitals which had to be brought into the fight, because Pune is not just PMC, it's not PCMC, it's also Pune rural, which is comprised of, as you know, we have 5 national highways that go through. A lot of patients come in from outside. We are kind of the healthcare hub for Western Maharashtra. So we had a huge challenge of trying to convince these rural hospitals to sign up. And again, many heroes came up. I'm just taking 1 or 2 names, but there are many people who did the amazing work. There's a doctor in our group called Dr. Bande, who is one of the very senior doctors in Pune. And he's pretty much because he's been teaching, he has many of his so-called chelas at every hospital in Pune. And he individually with us, with the help of NGOs, with the help of the government, went and convinced each of them that, can you start treating COVID patients? And it was, this is a lesson in management. I mean, all of us think of manufacturing and we say, okay, to convince somebody to take on some task, you are asking somebody to basically start treating COVID patients when they don't know what it will be. This doesn't make a lot of money. COVID, the charges are regulated. There is a lot of risk associated with it. There was a lot of stigma associated with it at that point in time. But that's where we started. So to give you a perspective for where Pune has come, we started with 400 beds for COVID. At the end of the last wave, we were at 31,000 beds, which is the largest in the country. This was more than Pune. Pune was more than Bangalore, more than Mumbai, more than Delhi, which again, remember, have large government hospitals. Now coming to equipment, we started to do a mapping of the ventilator capacity, because this was one of the key determinants. Oxygen came later. Total 400 ventilators were available in Pune. This included the ones that are needed for cardiac care, etc., because you can't not treat them. At last count, we had over 1,800 ventilators, plus maybe 500 BiPAP units, which now Pune has, which is again the largest such number in the country. Was it enough? Probably at the peak, no. We couldn't treat every patient that we had to. But was it better than most other cities? The answer is yes. And this was, again, an example of government, public, private, hospital partnership. All of these 4 levers were working. The private sector came up, and the speed at which the private sector can work, the government can't work. The government has to take care of the whole country. By the time the ventilators could come, by the time that they could be installed, could be months. We in the first wave installed about 300 to 400 ventilators within a space of 2 to 3 weeks, because this is what the private sector can do. It can bring the money, it can do the sourcing decisions, it can, maybe at some point we may have paid 5% more, but the fact was you needed to get it because there was a scarce availability of those resources. So we got the resources. Number 2, we had the medical doctors who agreed to install these, because not only did you need ventilators, you need intensivists. Now, you'll be shocked at this number. All of India only has 10,000 intensivists. The problem is not ventilators. The problem is trained staff to use it. India today has 50,000 ventilators, but only 10,000 intensivists. So how do you get enough people who are trained? This is highly specialized equipment. It's not like you can incubate anybody and you and I can do it. It takes 5 years of training to be able to do this. So the hospitals worked with them. The government supported. The collector, the commissioner, they were working 24/7. And I think our bureaucracy is much maligned. But the fact is, we saw closely how they were working 24/7. Their control rooms were manned 24/7. They were supporting, they were cajoling, they were doing everything that needed to be done. And most importantly, we had the healthcare workers who were putting in their 24/7 to see that this was being done. And the last and the most equally important component of these, the NGOs in Pune, I think, which are absolutely amazing. They did so much support work, whether it was on things like you need body bags. Unfortunately, we lost a lot of people. We didn't have enough body bags to be available. You needed ambulance support. We needed support for entry, because typically when you go into a hospital, you need data entry operators, you need staff. Now, how do you convince somebody to do data entry at a COVID hospital when they know that they can do a BPO job and get 3 times the money, but you're going to sit in a COVID center unvaccinated? Now, think about that as a management problem. And if you can solve that, you can solve a lot of other smaller problems. So I think this is the learning all of us had. But the important thing we all realized was, ultimately, as a city, everybody was committed to make it happen. And as a group, we were able to get all of these people, which are ordinary people, to do extraordinary things. And we were actually the support group. They were the group that did all the work.
I think fantastic. I think great. And you're how comfortably I think you all are able to talk about healthcare, about hospitals, about numbers. I think very important for everyone to pick up, your ability to learn, pick up, get into details, and I think execution all the way. I think that's what differentiated PPCR to many other initiatives globally, where there was a lot of research, a lot of talk, but there was no execution. And I think what finally matters is when the rubber hits the road. Correct. Are you really able to make a difference? Are you really able to make an impact? So I think that's very powerful. And I think, Pradeep, one quick question. I think, very important is the governance structure, your ability to track, your ability to do things, and your experience on power, the problem that you solved many years back. Is there something that helped you get the governance moving very quickly?
No. My 2 colleagues have been very charitable. I think governance was all 3 of us. It's just that when you have more gray hair than others, they listen to you. And that's a limited point. But on a serious note, I think we all come from upbringing, which is that you are a custodian. What is Maratha Chamber President, Vice President, or a DG? He or she is a custodian of public stuff. So moment you are a custodian, automatically you realize that you are accountable, if not to anybody else, to yourself. That was point number 1. In this case, there was a bit of a challenge, and I think it's important to understand. Just the way Sahil said, there was asymmetry of information. There was no visibility also what future is. I still remember one day I rang up Sudhir. I used to track in my home on this chart, because I'm a very brick and mortar type. How many patients came, how many got discharged. I used to track even hospital-wise, because there were a handful of them. Maidu mein kitna hai, Sassoon mein kitna hai. I was doing all that. So one day I told Sudhir so it was coming to 100 or so. And then he told me something which he said, please be ready. It will be 1,000 in 1 week to 2 weeks time. I said, Sudhir, don't joke like this. It's a very perverted joke hai. How can 100 positives? We were getting numb with 100. He said, 2,000 ho jayega. Then few days later, he said, 5,000 tak ki tayari karni chahiye humko. And I thought he was joking. But the main point I'm saying is that we were operating in a scenario where we had no visibility of the future. The corporates are used to long-term plan, perspective plan, dynamic plan, 6 rolling plan. Yahan kya roll ho raha tha? We were completely rolled over. So we had no idea as to what was coming. So that was one challenge. The second thing, which is interesting, and I think Sudhir, Prashant and I talked first of all, and I would be very candid, the government in general, state in general, was reasonably confident in the beginning they will handle it. So they were not willing to think beyond Naidu and Sassoon. And when we said, look, can we get the private hospital? We personally talked about getting private sector hospitals allocated, and government said, no, we can handle it. So even them asking private sector to come in was like a favor to private sector in government's perspective. They thought we know what to do. Naidu is there. Then we anyway helped, and private hospitals came out, and as Sudhir said, they were amazing, magnificent people who did it. Then we were getting some materials, and I think that's where governance came in. So private sector also started admitting COVID patients, and so was the government hospital. Prashant is very good at pushing. He pulled out one office order which said during those days, anything that you collect money and you get goods, you are supposed to hand it over to the government. Which means what? I go to various private citizens, collect money for who? For patients. I'm not collecting it for private hospital, or I'm collecting it for patients, but we were supposed to hand it over to the government, who will distribute in their wisdom. So I remember that time the divisional commissioner, Deepak ji, was very open and so on. So I talked to him once. I said, Deepak ji, this is the circular. Frankly, it is, and he agreed in privately. I said, kya matlab hai? If 60% of the patients are in private hospital, whatever I collect and I give 100% to the government, and you do it into your own center, not that you're going to consume it. So I said, we're going to work out a pattern. We'll track how many patients are there, COVID patients in different hospitals. And we'll allocate what we get, whether it is PPEs, whether it's sanitizers, whether it's thing, in proportion to the number of patients. So I told Mr. Deepak, I said, look, my criteria is number of patients in a hospital. It doesn't matter if it's a big or small, rural or urban, private or public. We're giving it for a patient and not for a hospital. This again was a major step which we took at that point of time and were firm about it, by which we allocated things. So this was a big deal for the government to do it. The same thing which came up, then testing became an issue. And I remember the conversation, Prashant, Sudhir, and I said, why aren't we getting more testing? We were at 18%, 17%, 20% PR, but we were not increasing the samples. So we had to really cajole the thing, and we had to tell them, please allow private hospitals to, private labs to do testing. There was a pushback on that also. You know, the government's pushback first on treatment, next on testing, and now on vaccination was total. They felt in their wisdom that they are equipped to do it. That they want to do it is a different matter. So I think that's what we had to push completely into this cause. To your last question, which is thing. So yes, I had done the power model, and again, very similar to what Prashant said. You need, first of all, I would go a little more philosophical. You can achieve success in such things when there is a mission you want to achieve. To have an agenda like I'll make Pune more livable, or Pune should be one of the top ranked cities in the country, doesn't mean anything to anybody. But if you say I'm going to solve your load shedding problem, or I'm going to address COVID epidemic, people will relate. So ऐसे agenda के लिए एक mission चाहिए, एक लक्ष्य चाहिए, एक goal चाहिए. Clarity of goal is important. So to that extent, this like power model, Pune power model, what was my agenda? कि we want to stop load shedding in the city of Pune. Somebody said, अरे Pune district का कर दो. Somebody said, पूरे महाराष्ट्र का क्यों नहीं कर देते? I said, नहीं, मुझे कुछ नहीं करना है. I understand Pune city, 2 circles of MSCB, where I want zero load shedding. So you need to be focused. At least, anyway, second is, yes, you need to have clarity. Second, you need somebody to run with the torch. Everybody will say something. So here was Sudhir running with the torch. He said, I'm going, then people follow you. Same thing I did in case of thing. Again, Pradeep Bhargava or Sudhir Mehta alone is not enough. In my case, when I did, it was CII. So when I went there, I went to CII. And every platform I said CII ne itna kiya hai, because it was ultimately the membership. Here, Sudhir and us, we're saying is Maratha Chamber. So you need somebody to run with the torch, clear mission, run with the torch, have an institutional backup. Then this soil comes in where people, I got, during my days, I still remember outstanding people like Mohan Dharia ji, etc. said, I went and talked to them, aap apni taraf se baat kariye. So he appealed to the people. I talked to Anu Aga, appealed to industry to give their gensets. So once you have a cause and a mission and a support, it happens. So I think the lessons, as Sudhir rightly said, unfortunately or fortunately for the city of Pune, the future was uncertain. So we had to explore and evolve and find a solution. There was no long-term MIS for governance. It just evolved as it did. Thank you.
No, I think the laser focus is very, very important. Sudhir, I think we'll quickly jump into with this, a clear mission, which is Mission Vayu. And, you spoke about a call with Anuj and Tamisak. You want to just share how quick it was, how fast it was, what happened, your call with Air India, everything that got mobilized. I think it's a great management lesson, but something that happened within a few days or maybe a week, I think is something that people can really relate to in terms of speed of execution, or how things can move if they really want things to move. So all yours,
Yeah.
Sudhir.
So, Vinit, I think this was the time where the first wave was pretty much for some time is normally we are prone to do in India, and probably are doing this. We all assumed COVID was over after that first wave, and we all went back to our lives and kind of said that, listen, it's not over, but we can go back and resume. And then suddenly this cases started going up, as you know. And this was a completely different animal again that we didn't understand, the so-called Delta variant at that point in time. And we all, Delta, Alpha, all of these were terms we didn't understand. It was known as the India variant at that point. It started from India. And one of the things we quickly realized, and again, this just goes to show early warning systems, because we have a WhatsApp group, which is basically comprised of all the leading heads of the hospitals in Pune. And typically that group is buzzing the whole day with discussions of what's happening. And suddenly we started to see that there was a lot of talk about requirement for oxygen going up. At the peak of the first wave, we had some challenges, but it was never so much of a critical issue. Pune at that point in time was needing about 60 metric tons of oxygen per day. That was the requirement for the medical oxygen. And then suddenly we could see the spikes starting to go crazy, and everybody was talking about more. This was the time where 15 to 20% of people would need oxygen. We as a group had actually given these high flow nasal HFNOs, which needed 16 to 18 liters of oxygen a minute. And they saved a lot of people. But then suddenly we saw that the oxygen was going to be short, and we were all scrambling. And we said, okay, what do we do? And the speed of this was absolutely crazy. I think we all blame the government, but beyond the point, I think no government in the world could have anticipated that the requirement for oxygen would go from 60 to 360 tons a day in a space of less. 600% is something where no surge planning can plan for 600%. So what could we do? We could do two things. One is regulate the demand, which is something we did with hospitals. We did a lot of these self-monitoring of what could be done. We did industry learnings. We did oxygen audits like we do in our companies. We found that a lot of material could be saved. But then during one of those conversations, I mentioned our drip irrigation company, and that company actually, Temasek is our partner for that company. They bought over the stake of the Israeli fund 2 years ago, and they happen now to be our partners in that company. And Temasek, as you know, is basically the government of Singapore. And one of the key gentlemen there, who is our partner at Temasek and is also on the board of Temasek with me, is a dear friend now. I met him only 2 years ago, but has become a dear friend now, is Anuj Maheshwari. Anuj is from Jaipur, but has spent a lot of time in Singapore now, and like the Indian diaspora, is very, very connected to India. And at the conclusion of our board meeting, it just happened to be one of those chance discussions that we were discussing, and he was aware of the work for COVID, and he was asking me that what's happening, and I'm hearing all of these situations where oxygen is becoming a critical thing. And at that point, we were all scrambling because nobody knew how do you get oxygen at the end of the first wave. And again, this now is all hindsight, but we have scientists in our group, and I still have that report with me, which we had sent at that time to the government and the Niti Aayog and to everybody in Pune and to the government in Maharashtra, where we had said that, listen, oxygen is good, maybe a challenge. And we had figured that it takes 1 year to set up these liquid oxygen plants. I spoke to the MD of Praxair at that time, and all of the other Inox, Siddharth Jain, and all of these people. And they told me that, listen, it takes 1 year to set up the plants. Of course, all of us forgot all that because the first wave was over. And then we scrambled and realized that this was not available. So to come back to the discussion with Anuj, we had a discussion, and he told me something which was kind of stuck with me. He said that Singapore and the chief executive of Temasek happens to be the wife of the Singapore Prime Minister. And you know how forward thinking a country Singapore is. And he said, listen, at the end of the first wave in Singapore, she had the foresight and she told the Temasek team that please create a strategic reserve of assets which is available for any country where there may be a COVID surge. And he said, we have this, and let me check if it's available. Would you be interested? And when somebody tells you something like that, it's like you found manna, or you found gold, or you found something. Oxygen was literally gold, and this was an evening 7 o'clock discussion, maybe Singapore time 10:30, 11 o'clock. And I said, yes, Anuj, if it's something that you can help us with, please do. And India desperately needs it, and we will figure out how to get it there. And that's kind of the 7 p.m. when Mission Vayu started. Now we had two things there. One was how to get, again, oxygen plants available. And I'll give you again a small story of how a group works. There is a gentleman called Mr. Ashish Agarwal. I'm sorry, I'm naming these people, but now they've become, and incidentally, many of these people in the virtual world I have not met so far. So I've only met them through WhatsApps and connections. And Ashish sent me a message to say, sir, I got a message that there is some oxygen plants which are available with a company in Aurangabad. And I still remember this was right after my call at 7. This was at 8 o'clock in the evening. And he said, can we figure out what to do? And if you remember, that's the time where the scramble for oxygen had started. And so this gentleman that I didn't know in Aurangabad, I got the number, spoke to him at 8:15 p.m. And he said, listen, I have 12 plants available which can generate oxygen. These plants are of different capacities from 500 liters per minute to about 2000, which can again take care of maybe between 50 and 200 patients. And these are the last 12 plants I have available. The total cost of these is about 12.5 crores. They can be installed in the next 2 weeks. So we had some orders which are cancelled, but since you called, they are available. But I'm getting calls since the morning, and obviously as a businessman, I'll give it to the first person who gives me an advance. Now this is 8 p.m. We said, okay, what can we do? And maybe we were a little greedy for Pune, but again, as I think Pradeep ji mentioned, our focus at that point was clearly Pune. So we said, how do we see that we can get these plants from Pune? And this is, again, I think something is very special about this city, that within a space of from that 8 p.m. at night, we worked through the night to kind of do the evaluation. Now, was it as detailed as we would do in an industrial setting? No, the answer is no, because it was the only product available at that point in time. It's not that you have 5 quotations and 5 people and comparatives and you can kind of put your pricing committee to discuss. It was something where it was completely one-sided. But to cut a long story short, by 8:30, 9 p.m. in the morning, we had commitments from 6 or 7 amazing companies in Pune who agreed to fund us the money. More amazingly, we had commitments from the government, including the mayor of PMC and all of these other people who said, okay, some of these we will pick up through the government channel because they have mayor funds and all of these. So it's sometimes when our government wants to work, it can work astonishingly quickly. And the third part of it was 1 or 2 hospitals who said they would pick it up. And all of this was going on through our WhatsApp groups, which we have 4 or 5 groups through the night. And by 12 o'clock, we had placed the purchase order for about 12 crores worth of oxygen plants. Now, this just goes to show what is it that we can do as a group together, because we were able to get together this money, the commitments, get all of this going. And then, of course, we sent a person to Aurangabad. We used our collective resources to put somebody, because we were afraid even if we give the money, somebody else will pick up the plants. It was one of those things where it would happen. So this was happening on the one side. On the other side, Anuj came back in the morning to say that, listen, we have these concentrators which are available. Would you like them? I mean, it's like telling somebody who's dying of thirst to say, can I get you some water? And I said, okay, we'll pick these up. How can you get it to us? Again, the credibility factor comes in. He said, can the Maratha Chamber be the person that imports? The Maratha Chamber had an import-export license, which I think was 86 years old, but had never been used. So we kind of dusted it out from somewhere, got out the import license. Fortunately, Even in our group, we have senior people in the political system. And again, that's the amazing thing, across political parties. And so we used some of those contacts, and 2 hours later, he said, listen, I have 4,000 concentrators available in Singapore. Now, this was the time where the flights were shut. How do we get them here? So one of our very senior political contacts spoke to the Prime Minister's office. Again, this is one of those funny stories. I get a call from somebody in Delhi. I pick up the phone and it says, I'm Mr. Rajiv Bansal. Now, unfortunately, I didn't know who Mr. Rajiv Bansal was. And I say, yes, sir. He happened to be the chairman of Air India. And he said, how can I help you? I understand you're trying to get some concentrators. So I said, thank you. And he said, here, we will make Air India available for you. Please use the services to get it. And again, we got a call from somebody from the customs department. And normally you're kind of afraid when you get a call from somebody, the customs commissioner calls you. And he said, I'm the customs commissioner. I understand you're trying to get some concentrators. How can we help you clear these? And within 24 hours from that, we had the first batch of concentrators leaving from Singapore on an Air India flight to India. Parallelly, Amazon stepped in and they were very kind to fund these concentrators. And within a space of about 10 days, we had almost 10 aircrafts worth of material, because this all had to come in by air, which came in. We were able to distribute this. And this, of course, started as a Maharashtra project, because it started as a Pune project. Then we realized that it was not enough to just take care of Pune, because the cases were all across Maharashtra. So at that point, we were in touch with the Maharashtra government, and they also supported us. And we said, we will cater to all districts in Maharashtra. Now, within that period, again, given this is I think the tech world and the world that we all live in, there is the IIM Ahmedabad Association, there is the IIT Association. All of them got in touch with us. There is the ACT ACT grants, which is all the finance companies. Sandeep Singhal is there. Again, I have not met Sandeep so far, but we started interacting over WhatsApp. They got involved in our campaign. We had Amazon, which got involved. We had many. There is a startup company called Delivery, which is now a large company about to go public. They agreed to do the distribution. There were many, almost 20, 25 organizations which came together. And together, I think within a space of less than 10 days, we got in about 10,000 concentrators into India. MCCI has probably the unique distinction of, during those 10 days, to be the largest importer of medical equipment into India in terms of numbers. And during this time, we also were able to get a duty exemption from the Prime Minister's office, because we were able to kind of, I think, put our case across that this is all charity money. Can we please waive the import duties, which they kindly agreed to do. So sum and substances, I think sometimes we are very, very cynical about what can happen in India. And we don't kind of believe that the government can move fast, the public sector can move fast, the private sector can move fast. But this was one real example where we had absolute cooperation from everybody. I mean, it was 24/7. I messaged the Air India chairman at midnight, and at 12:01, I would get a response. That was the kind of feedback that I was getting. And it was not because I was a VIP. It was because he felt that this was a mission which was important enough to be able to support. If it was, whether it was our team at MCCI, they worked 24/7 to get it happen. And I think what gave us probably the biggest satisfaction was that when these went to all the remote locations, they were put to use within a space of maybe 5 to 10 minutes after they got there. That was the extent. And I think all of us remember those horrible days when you had all of these people who just had no oxygen.
Yeah, you did speak about, some of them reaching Bihar, some of them reaching Jammu and Kashmir. They were put to use in 5 minutes, and they saved many lives, right? There were, data points which said this whole response may have saved more than 100,000 lives plus lives. But, this also Mission Vayu ended up becoming a global, movement in some manner. And maybe, you did speak about donors coming from Canada, a 10-year-old, calling you or saying, hey, I want to contribute. And there are various people who came together or reached out to you. You want to share a little bit about how did it something which was so small, started in wave one, ended up becoming, taking from 400 to 31,000 COVID beds, something that was only for, for public sector. Actually, private sector ended up doing something way more, something which is responsibility of the government. Actually made there was a parallel front where everyone joined and everyone took credit off. But I think a very important part is would really, I think for everyone, if there is a mission, you have an intent to move forward, everyone joins in. That's a very important message. But more importantly is, I think, scaling up or reaching out to something fairly large from a small city. You want to talk, it'll be good to share some thoughts.
Yeah, Vineet, it's amazingly humbling what the kind of support that we got first across our city, then across the country, then I think around the world. And the amazing thing is, in this world of today's technology, with Twitter, with WhatsApp groups, with Facebook, one of the amazing things is information spreads so fast. And we had so many people who we didn't, so for instance, we started, and this was Prashant's idea, we started a campaign where we said, okay, let us start a targeted campaign across each district. So you may have a diaspora which is from Latur, and they want to support Latur first because that's where they feel there is a need, or somebody wants to support Jalgaon first. And I remember we had this discussion at 9 in the morning, and by 11 o'clock, Prashant had 12 pages running with online contributions to be taken across Maharashtra, and we raised almost 2 crores in a space of 2 days. But the most amazing stories are, we had a little girl, 10-year-old girl, who posted on social media, and she raised $1,000 somewhere around the world for her birthday. And she said, listen, I have never met her. I don't know who she is. I would like to thank her personally, but haven't had the opportunity to do so. But she raised $1,000 for Mission Vayu, trusting in someone and a mission that probably she had no direct connect with, only because it was one of those things where all of us had emotion connected. We had concentrators that came in from Canada. John Hopkins in the US sent us 25 concentrators that they managed to get from the US. There was another message I got from somebody who had 10 concentrators that they happened to get in London, and they said, can you help us to get it to India? Now, this was the time where international flights were shut, but even 10 concentrators for Delhi was like gold. So we actually spoke to ACT. There was an ACT employee who spoke to somebody at the Indian embassy in the UK. The gentleman went over to this person's house, picked up these 10 concentrators, took it to the airport. The airline flew it there. It was clear, and then that night it was available in Delhi for 10 people. Okay, maybe it was a drop in the ocean, but the fact is that there were so many people who did these amazing acts of kindness, and people went way beyond their call of duty to be able to do this. There is a Colonel Pranay Pawar, again, he's from Pune, but he's stationed in Jammu, and he sent me a message, and he's been doing amazing work in Jammu. We have been supporting him with his hospitals. There is instances in Bihar where we were able to send all of this equipment. The Thai network, I'll mention this way. There is a amazing, again, person called Hari Balasubramaniam in Calcutta. I'm sure many of the people who are listening in today will know him. And Hari was started a similar initiative in Calcutta, and we were able to support him to get 50 BiPAPs and a few hundred concentrators distributed to the East India in Calcutta and many other places there. We had the ACMA Association, which is headed by Deepak Jain and Sanjay Kapoor, both of who had large companies in Delhi. They were supporting us for Delhi. We had Mr. Jain in Jalgaon, which is Jain Irrigation, and he did the. So there is there is so many people that
even the startups, right? There was a lot of innovation that ended up happening, right? I think Pune was always known for Serum Institute, but I think there was so much of innovation which is more than Serum, and so many got involved. Maybe you want to add something on for the entrepreneurs in terms of what Pune ended up doing in this space.
I can talk for hours on this, but again, we in the Maratha MCCIA, we have our startup committee. Vishwas Mahajan is there, so he's, I think, also on listening in today. But Pune has this amazing culture of startups, and now some of these are no longer startups. So one of the key people who he was involved in PPCR and is one of our biggest supporters is Sujit Jain. And he's involved with a company called MyLabs. If you remember, MyLabs started as a small company when the first test happened. I think they can by no means be classified as a small company now. They are probably one of the biggest in the country or in the world, because now they've come up with these new tests. There is the story of Noka Robotics. Noka is a company from IIT Kanpur. Now, I had met these guys because we run an incubator and we were supporting them. And we are all both part of the Indian Angels Network, and they were companies which was funded by Indian Angels Network. You know what they were making before the COVID pandemic started? They were making basically equipment to clean solar panels, which were robots to clean solar panels. Now, these two young men in the first pandemic, I still remember they came to me and they said, we want to develop a ventilator. Now, in a space of 2 to 3 weeks, using the help of IIT Kanpur, they got help from a lot of us in Pune. We had a ventilator group, which was actually working on, we had 6 projects on ventilators actually, out of which 3 of them are now currently producing ventilators. The other 3 did not progress it, but of course helped the others to do it. In the last 16 months, Noka Robotics has given 4,000 ventilators to India. Now, given means produce 4,000. So at last count, if we have 50,000 ventilators, and I can tell you the benefit of having Noka Robotics in Pune, because during the second wave, in a space of less than 2 weeks, I used to call Nikhil literally at like 1 or 2 o'clock at night and say, "Aaj Nikhil, kitne ventilator gaye?" And because it was Pune, we were able to pull in, and he gave us almost 200 ventilators within a space of 10 days, which got installed. Now, if we had to wait for any and nothing against the large companies, but if we had to wait for a company in the US or somewhere to get this, we would never have got them in time to save so many lives. And this is the story of Pune. Pune has, there's another company that does work, which actually created the e-challans for the police and all of this other things. There were companies which have created. So I think the startups have played their role. Now, the other thing in Pune, I think, Vineet, which is very important, is the startups also have a bunch of scientists which have been helping them to do this. Again, here is a city where you have an NCL. You have all of these, Mr. Premnath is there, who's done amazing work with working with startups. You have Sashidhar, who's very much part of our group, is working on the third wave. So you have this confluence of scientists, companies, startups. We are now working on a concentrator projects, and one of the companies which is helping us to do that is the Kirloskar. Now they need no introduction. Rahul is my very close friend, and he's helping a couple of startup companies on making parts for concentrators. So this is, I think, if we can somehow crack this mantra where all of these amazing individuals and companies can come together, I think there isn't a problem that we can solve.
Absolutely. I think that's a fantastic message. I think if things come together, and Pune clearly not only contributing to Pune, Maharashtra, but also India. I think just in the interest of time, we'll spend a few minutes about wave 3.
Sorry, Vineet, this is the soil we are talking about.
Absolutely. I totally agree. This is the soil, and it's not just soil of Pune contributing to Pune, but it's contributing to the country. And I think sooner or later, clearly being, a driver for innovation for the world, right? Not just, and Sudhir and all of you relating it to Israel. So clearly, it's a very, very powerful story. So I think just the last part about preparing for the last wave, hopefully, and that's what I was talking to Sudhir, and that's why I use the word last wave, so that it doesn't happen, or the vaccination really does the trick, and things are much better. And of course, congratulations for 100,000 vaccinations in a single day. I think somehow the date moved, and today is the date when this new milestone has been achieved. But just preparing for the next wave, you want to talk a few minutes about it, and then in the end, we'll play a short video of someone who sent you all a message. But quickly, Sudhir.
Sure. So first of all, I hope we don't have any more waves. We need to get back to our normal lives. But again, one of the things that we've learned from this is we don't know what's coming. And you are right, today is actually a very nice day for us in Pune, because we crossed this 100,000 vaccinations. The first day we attempted this was April 1st. And many people thought it was an April Fool's joke on that day, because we were trying to do 100,000. And I got many messages, why did you choose this date? And could we not have done it on some other date? We couldn't do 100,000 on that day, but today the city has covered 100,000. But the important thing, of course, is we have 40 lakh people who are vaccinated, who've had their first vaccines today, which is still a long way to go. We have a lot of work ahead. One of the things that we are trying to do as a city, and this has again an emotive appeal, August 15th, if we can get every person in the city, at least with the first vaccine, I think we will have that's for us in our generation. I think that will be a really true Azadi if we can achieve it. I think it's achievable given the vaccine supply, which is now improving. So that's our next target. But also, we are now focused on what we can do in terms of the third wave, this Delta plus variant. Again, we only understand that it's more transmissible and it can have bigger consequences. What we've done is we've got a cross-functional group which is working on it. So we have right from the Pune Knowledge Cluster, we are just the enablers. We don't do the work. The work is done by all of these amazing people. The Pune Knowledge Cluster, we've got people like Dr. Santosh Dikshit, we've got Dr. Shashidhar who's working on it. We have epidemiologists who are giving their ideas. Deepak Mahisekar has been mentoring and guiding with this group. We have many doctors who they have been involved with, and what they're trying to do is actually, to the extent possible, say that how can we plan for it if there is different scenarios of number of cases, what will happen under each of the scenarios, what is our capability to take care of oxygen, can we do a better job, fortunately this time, on stocking up on things like remdesivir or other things, which are all things we didn't understand the names of, would turn out to be nightmares, and people were literally begging for these medicines. I mean, they were selling for lakhs of rupees. That's the negative part of it. But so I think the only thing we've realized 2 or 3 things. And if there's one appeal that I think and I'm speaking now not as myself, as the Pune platform, as a citizen, is one is vaccination. Please do encourage every person in the city, because it's clear. I don't need to explain. It's not our lives, it's our families' lives, community lives. We need to get vaccinated. It's possible now to be able to do it. Number 2 is this economic aspect. We did not talk about the economic aspect, but lives and livelihood. I think today, while lives are alive, many livelihoods are very badly impacted. As the chamber, we are in touch with many businesses, restaurants, small restaurants, for instance. I mean, I think you could not have a worse news for them this evening, where Pune has gone into level 3 and the restaurants will now shut at 7 p.m. What do you tell the families of people who've not had revenue for 15 months that, listen, again, because of the stupidity of some people who are again congregating, who are again having these big rallies, and I'm going to be completely politically incorrect in saying large political rallies are going on. It's a crying shame. I think as citizens, we need to speak up for this, because there is thousands and millions of us who run honest businesses, and they're going to be, are we wanting them to beg on the streets? What do you want them to do if there is no revenue for 16 months? They just started their business and we are shutting them down again. So to that extent, I think it's incumbent that all of us follow these systems. This problem is too big to be solved by the government. As citizens, we need to do a lot more. We need to speak a lot more. I think we need to be vocal. There is nothing personal against any politician. We are very fortunate that all political parties have supported us, and we have worked very closely with all of them. This is not a political movement, but we need to now ensure that we follow COVID appropriate behavior. We ask other people to do it, because too much is at stake. And I think, fortunate, if we can vaccinate fast enough, we will not have a third wave. But from what, again, and I'm not taking, this is not my opinion, because I'm not the smart one here. We have much smarter people in the group. Their universal opinion is a third wave will come if we don't vaccinate enough, and if we do the stupidity that we are now doing again, of considering COVID to be over and kind of saying, let's go party and make sure that this is suicide. Let's not do it. I was talking to somebody in Israel this afternoon. They've gone back to wearing masks in Israel, and I asked him why, and his answer was Delta plus. Now, Israel is going back to wearing masks because of Delta plus. And what are we doing in India? We are 20,000 people are agitating over an airport which will come up in 3 years, for which a name is to be decided. Can we not do better as citizens?
I think that's a very, very powerful message. And I think everyone should follow COVID appropriate behavior or be on sessions like Zoom, etc., where one can be without masks, but otherwise be on masks, everywhere that one goes. I think that's a very powerful message. So, with that, Sudhir, there is a small message. Ganesh wanted to join in the session, but he couldn't, so he just sent a message, and with that, we'll pretty much close the session in the interest of time, maybe a couple of minutes more. So, Namrata, you have the video.
Hi, Sudhir Mehta for me is a hero for the city because he's a man of incredible vision, passion, and a real bias for action. I remember first meeting him when he was the head of the Western region for CII, and his activities were really phenomenal. And he followed in the footsteps of Pradeep Bhargav, who also had a great innings as CII Western region chair. But Sudhir, later on, when I invited him to join the board of Pune City Connect, almost immediately accepted. And last year, when we did an amazing transition from Pune City Connect to Lighthouse Communities Foundation, it was Sudhir who advised us on how to go about it, and it was a very orderly, very smooth transition. The whole Pune platform has been his brainchild. In the first wave of COVID, tremendous stuff happened. In the second wave, I think we all rallied around and made sure that the kind of vision he had, in our own ways, we could enable it to succeed. So I think across Sudhir, Pradeep, and many, many icons of this city, we have a great thing going, which is the reason why Pune, to my mind, remains the best city in the country and will continue to succeed. Thank you, Sudhir, for everything you do and will continue to do for all of us.
Yeah, thanks, Sudhir. Ganesh wanted to be a part of the session, but he couldn't. So I think the Friday trick, Friday, of course, and with being the last possible evening for some time to come, we did have a challenge. But thank you so much for joining in the My Story session and being here. Thank you, Pradeep. Thank you, Prashant, for making this this evening happen. Really appreciate, and a salute from Thai Pune community and all of us. And you will have all our support, and hope we'll continue to make Pune safer, Maharashtra safer, and I think contribute a lot to India as well as the society. So thank you so much, and thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Vinith. And let's make India COVID death-free India. I think that's what we all can achieve, and let's make it happen in the next few months, please.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Bye-bye. With that, we'll thank you all and look forward to seeing you all in the next MSS. Thank you.